So, E3 2014 is finally upon us. Yes, it's that 1 week of the year, no matter what platform you're gaming on, you're gonna mark it down in your calendar. Why? Because games, and yet more games. Now, we're always eager to know what the best and the brightest in our favourite of creative industries are up to, and E3 is the perfect place for those big names to flex their creative muscles. And names don't come much bigger than Microsoft. Microsoft were the first company to take the centre stage at E3, so here's a brief summary of the best stuff Microsoft had to show. Microsoft had a pretty poor showing at E3 2013, where they seemed to forget why they'd entered the video game industry at all. To give us great games to play, am I right? Well, this year, Microsoft were back to remind us that they are still capable of delivering fantastic games that we'll all love to play. Yes, the Microsoft E3 press conference seemed to be nothing but games. And starting the show off, as every good show should start off with a bang, was Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. With the next installment in the Call of Duty franchise, developers Sledgehammer Games certainly are trying to shake things up from that modern FPS first-person shooter formula, that we've all become accustomed to. I mean, I'm sure you'll agree with me that the modern FPS was starting to get a bit stagnant. During the E3 gameplay demo, we saw a Call of Duty game set in a not-too-distant sci-fi future. There is so much sci-fi on this game, it's almost unrecognizable from the previous Call of Duty games. So much so, I'd even liken it further to a Killzone game, something similar to that style now. Yet, most of the tech that was on show was pretty believable, as it all seemed to be based upon stuff that we use today. There were swarms of rampant flying drones, laser rifles, smart grenades that could be changed to adapt and fit different situations. The player was even using some form of jet boots to traverse the battlefield. Personally, I've skipped a past few of the Call of Duty titles because they just haven't brought enough new to the franchise. Yet this new sci-fi setting might just be enough to have me picking up my laser rifle later on this year. As seems to be a recurring trend with the Call of Duty games, any DLC for Advanced Warfare will be coming to the Xbox One first. Alright, Microsoft, so how are you going to top an excellent showing from Call of Duty then? Well, of course, with the Master Chief. Yes, Halo Master Chief Collection was also announced during the press conference. The collection had been heavily rumoured in the build-up to the press conference, and I, for one, cannot wait to see this come to the Xbox One. And we certainly won't have to wait long, as the game is scheduled for announce on November the 11th. The Master Chief Collection features all 4 Halo games, from Combat Evolved to Halo 4, and yes, even Halo 2 has received a HD makeover. All games will be accessible through a unified menu system and playable from one disc. Now, all 4 games will be running in full 1080p at 60 frames per second. I'm sure you'll all be very pleased to hear this. I guess the Master Chief is just going to have to give that Spartan armor a bit of a buff if he's going to be looking his best, eh? Now, the Master Chief Collection features over 100 multiplayer maps. That's all of the maps that have been released during the course of the Halo franchise, and will have a collective gamer score of 4,000. A tasty package for all you achievement hunters, I'm sure. But if that wasn't enough, Halo Nightfall, the live-action TV series that will lead into Halo 5, is also included in the Master Chief Collection. And speaking of Halo 5, the Master Chief Collection just so happens to feature beta access to Halo 5 later this year. Now, the Xbox One isn't a platform that's abundant with console exclusive, but the few that it does have certainly set the benchmark for their particular genres. One of these franchises being the Fable series. Although Fable developers Lionhead Studios may have lost their Molyneux, they certainly haven't lost their innovation, and are definitely branching out with the next installment in the Fable franchise, Fable Legends. Details discussed during the E3 press conference sets Fable Legends 400 years prior to the other Fable games and will be released as Season 1 as Lionhead expects the game to grow over the course of its life. Legends focuses heavily upon online cooperative play, where you and 3 mates will band together as a group of heroes. Now, you've got your typical wisecracking Prince Charming, a shield-wielding female warrior, a crossbow-equipped archer, and of course, picking up the rear, there's the old wizard there. Now, all 4 heroes will be pitted against a 5th player who takes control of a villain. Now, this villain views the game from a top-down perspective, turning Fable Legends into some form of competitive, top-down, multiplayer, real-time combat. I don't really have a clue, but it looks damned interesting. And with a beta coming this year and then a full release scheduled tentatively before the year is out, we won't have to wait long before we get to jump into Fable Legends. Now, I hope you guys are keeping up with me because there's a few more big games that I'm just dying to tell you about. Microsoft also showed off Rise of the Tomb Raider with a release schedule for Christmas 2015. Rise of the Tomb Raider follows on from the excellent franchise reboot that was just Tomb Raider. Now, during the trailer shown, we see Lara undergoing some much needed therapy after the ordeals that she experienced on the island during the previous game. Of course, Lara doesn't spend all of her time sat around in some plush psychiatrist button-backed art leather armchair. Nope, we also get to see her headed out off on some new adventures, this time actually in some tombs. Rise of the Tomb Raider was a very welcome surprise indeed. And if this next game is half as good as the original Tomb Raider, and of course it's going to be twice as good looking when it's on the Xbox One, it will certainly make the perfect Christmas gift for 2015. So after spending the year pretty much rebooting the image of the Xbox One itself, rebooting old franchises certainly seemed to be a bit of a trend for Microsoft this year. And none more so than Crackdown. Yes, the ever-popular Crackdown series will be making its way to the Xbox One, bringing with it more co-op-focused, super-powered crime fighting set in a neon-focused open world that simply looks prettier than ever. During the CGI trailer, the super-powered agents even destroyed the buildings to bring down the bad guys, and according to Crackdown creator Dave Jones, the city isn't simply an exciting place to do battle against the criminal underworld, but the buildings themselves will also be making up part of your arsenal. The original Crackdown game was one of the first must-own console exclusives from the previous generation, and if this next game brings with it yet more orb-collecting, super-powered crime fighting, free running, and of course an endless horde of baddies to gun down, what more could Xbox One owners ask for? Microsoft certainly had a lot of games to show, way too many to try and mention them all here. However, some other highlights from the Microsoft E3 press conference that I'd just like to mention were some pretty interesting indie titles, particularly a Steamboat Willie-inspired indie game called Cuphead. And there was even a new teaser trailer for a remake of Phantom Dust. And of course, we got yet another mouth-watering Witcher 3 demonstration thrown into the mix. There was simply so many games at the show that it seems that even Microsoft forgot to bring up the Kinect this time, because apart from a Dance Central demonstration, the Kinect didn't even get a look in during the show. Well, I think that pretty much brings you up to date with everything that was worth a mention during Microsoft's E3 press conference. But stay tuned because I'll be bringing you more summaries from each of the individual press conferences shown during E3. And I'll even bring you up to date on the Nintendo Direct. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at xbenblasterx, where I'll be keeping you regularly updated about all things E3 related. And of course, I strongly recommend that you check in with expansivedlc.com regularly for all of the breaking E3 news as it happens. But for now, guys, go and enjoy E3.